Too often in life, when we have differences with other individuals, be they members of our own families or members of the greater entity of Klal Yisrael, we kind of retreat into our self-chosen positions, and we say regarding the others, let them gain. Let them go wherever they wish. Let them live however they desire, regardless of the chasm that will exist between ourselves, and it really doesn't matter at the end of the day. In this week's Parshas Lech Lecha, Avram Avinu realizes that he has to part ways from his brother-in-law Lot. They have such different aspirations in life. They have such different priorities. Avram is the individual of the greatest spirituality, spreading monotheism around the world, explaining to people of the Metzias Habore, the existence of a Kadosh Baruch Hu as the creator of the world and as the ultimate one in charge of the world, and sufficiently interested that he has a hashgacha, that he has a divine providential relationship with everything that exists within. In contrast to Lot, who chooses to live in Sodom. But when Abraham turns to Lot and explains that they can no longer live near each other, he turns to him and he uses a very unusual lashon, a very unusual language. He says, we have to part ways. Which is understood by Targum Yonasan ben Uziel to mean that Avram said to Lot, if you go north, I'll live in the south. If you'll go west, I'll live in the east. But I will never be so far from you that in an hour of need, you will not be able to reach out to me. And indeed, when ultimately Lot is taken captive by the four kings, Avraham Avinu saddles up, he enters the fray and the war, he conquers the kings, and he reacquires Lot, restoring him to freedom. But isn't it unusual, the lashon, the language that is chosen by the pasuk? Imasmol ve'emina, if you'll go to the left, as it were, I'll go to the right. Ve'im hayamin, and if you go to the right, ve'asmeila, I'll go to the left. And I thought to myself, perhaps that there's an additional message here, and it really dovetails to what the Rambam explains in Hilchos Deis, that in life there are always extremes. But says the Rambam, in life, what we are supposed to constantly work upon, both in terms of our midos, our characters, and in terms of our priorities in life, they should not be to the extremes on the line itself. But rather there should be a locus. There should be a point that is somewhat midway. This is the derech hayeshara. This is the proper road to embrace. This is the derech hamamutza or the derech hamtzoes. This is the in-between point between the other goals that are so separated by definition to such extremities. And therefore, what I think we're being told is that Avraham Avinu was saying to Lot effectively, Imasmol ve'emina, we have our great differences, and we can't live near each other. But you know what? But I love you enough, and I have a responsibility sufficient, as far as I'm concerned, on your behalf, that if you go asmol, if you go all the way to the left, as it were, ve'emina, I will tug at you and I'll pull you back and I'll be mekar of you and draw you near, more towards the opposite direction, to the right, so that we'll have a relationship. And we'll remind ourselves that we are one family and we are one people. V'im hayamin, and if you choose to go in the opposite direction, v'asmeila, I'll pull you back to where I am standing, more towards the left, as it were, pulling you closer to the Shul HaZahav, to the golden path, to the Derech HaMamutzav, to the Derech HaMtzoes, to the middle road, as it were, where all of us can ultimately coexist within a greater framework of understanding, relationship, and shared priorities and goals. What an important lesson that's housed in this week's Sedra. Because so often in life, when we have our differences, we simply accept the differences and accept the fact that those differences will ultimately result in our having little, if nothing whatsoever, to do with each other. And that's not the way it's supposed to be. That's not what a Kodesh Baruch Hu wants. It's not the Torah way. Kol Yisrael Arevim, all of us indeed are ultimately guarantors and individuals of responsibility, one for the other. And towards that end, we're told about the story of the parting of ways between Avraham and Lot, not simply to teach us that people don't always get along, but to instruct us that when they don't get along sufficiently, that they can't live under the same roof, or maybe even on the same block, or maybe even in the same community, they can still find ways to share a relationship that is cogent, that is meaningful, that is responsible and loving in nature. Have a wonderful Shabbos.